a bell curve distribution, sort of, where this is the most likely outcome. This is what Republicans would need to take over. This is 51, right, for them?
Yeah.
So you see probably 60% of this pie is colored in here.
Translation for the math impaired, Nate's projection is a 40% chance Democrats hold on, but a 60% chance the GOP wins, with a 30% shot they win big.
All right, folks. He's talking about Nate Silver there, obviously, and welcome back. We're joined right now by Kyle Kondik, Director of Communications at the University of Virginia's Center for Politics and Managing Editor for Sabato's Crystal Ball. Hello, Kyle.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are the Republicans?
You know, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It looks like there are, if you look at the whole Senate map, there are three really good opportunities for Republicans to pick up seats: Montana, South Dakota, and West Virginia. And then you've got a big group of seats, 6 held by Democrats, that are all super close: Arkansas, Louisiana, Iowa, North Carolina, Alaska, and then Colorado. The polls in those states all indicate that, you know, there were the top 2 candidates are within maybe a point or two of each other. And then you've also got Kentucky, which is the one Republican-held seat that is pretty close, although I think Mitch McConnell, he's up a few points, and I think I'd much rather be him than his opponent, Allison Grimes. But you put it together, and I think Republicans are pretty clearly about halfway there to a Senate majority. But then where the rest of the other 3 seats they need comes from is kind of an open question at this point.
What has happened? Because you know, the predictions earlier on were that there was a great likelihood. You heard Nate Silver there. I know Larry had some disagreements when I had him on with Nate Silver's predictions. I don't know if it was that specifically, but nonetheless, I think, and you tell me what 3 months ago your mindset was as compared to now. It seems to me that now there seems to be a little bit more caution when talking about the possibility that the Senate's will the Republicans will take over the Senate and maybe even score, you know, big in doing so.
You know, I actually think not a whole lot has changed. I think that maybe 3 months ago, you know, I think the likelihood for most observers was that there was sort of a slight Republican lean in you know, favoring them to take the Senate. And really, I don't think that's all that much different now. I think that a lot of these races have been remarkably stable. I think certainly Arkansas, Louisiana, North Carolina, those are all states that I think have all been fairly consistent. You know, I think maybe the difference is that Democrats maybe are doing a little bit better in Alaska and North Carolina, which are 2 states that Mitt Romney won that have freshman Democratic incumbents. I think Democrats are leading in both those states, but then Iowa has sort of come on the scene as an open Democratic-held seat where that's basically a toss-up now, when I think maybe 3 months ago, a lot of people, including myself, looked at it as more of a kind of leaning Democratic state. So maybe the lineup of states has changed ever so slightly in terms of, you know, how the dominoes would fall for Republicans if they win the Senate. But the overall likelihood of Republicans taking control, I don't know if that's changed a whole lot. I mean, Nate Silver was on saying, you know, 60%. You know, maybe I'd be just slightly less than that, but we're not talking about really a big disagreement.
Right. All right. You know, there's a piece in Politico called "Surfs Up," and asking the question, will there be a GOP wave in the Senate or a wipeout? Let me ask you this. You know, Labor Day is Monday. People start coming back, and they say that, you know, people don't start getting serious, paying any attention to all this stuff until we get down to nitty-gritty time. And I guess as of Tuesday of next week, we'll be 2 months away from the election. Should we expect to get some kind of indication? Will the polls start reflecting changes, or maybe a more certainty as to where we would be headed? Will we be able to know more as we get closer to the November date?
You know, I don't know. I feel like not only have a lot of these Senate polls been fairly static, but also the kind of national environment has been fairly static too. You know, President Obama's approval rating, which I do think has some bearing on these races. it hasn't really changed a whole lot in the past number of months. He's been sort of, depending on what poll you look at, he's stuck in maybe between about 41 and 44%. That's not great, but it's also hasn't changed a whole lot. I think that maybe if there's some sort of actual event that happens that maybe moves public opinion, we might start to see a change. And I think if we do see a change in the races, it probably would go toward the Republicans, just because, generally speaking, you'd rather be the out-of-power party in the White House than the president's party in a midterm election. That's probably more true in House races than in Senate races, generally speaking. But I think maybe if we were to see some movement, it would be toward the Republicans. But there just hasn't been a ton of change. And also, historically speaking, President Obama's approval rating is usually pretty bad in August for whatever reason. I think that presidents sometimes experience kind of a summer swoon.
Yeah,
but that hasn't really happened to any great noticeable degree this year. So maybe the president bounces back a little bit, and that's helpful to the Democrats. But I still think
Well, Kyle, I hate to interrupt, but I don't want to run out of time before I ask you this.
Sure.
If the president, for instance, were to sign an executive order granting amnesty prior to November, and if other things on the ground take hold, could we look for those kinds of things to greatly affect the direction of the election?
Sure, I think it would have to be something pretty significant. Maybe it would be something the president does, as you suggest. But again, there have been a lot of big events that have happened over the last few months, particularly in foreign affairs. They haven't really moved the needle all that much. I think the likelihood, again, is still for a Republican Senate, but just the odds of that are just slightly better than the Democrats holding control.
And Chris Matthews was hoping that the outrage in Ferguson and around the country because of it could drive black voters and others on the left to the polls. Any indication that would happen?
No, I don't think so. And also, I don't think there's been a backlash on the right either on this issue. I mean, I think it is something that obviously got a lot of coverage, but it takes a lot to move the needle across the board in American elections. And again, for all the stuff that's happened, including what's happening in Iraq and Ukraine,
not much movement at all.
Hasn't moved the needle a lot.
Very interesting. Kyle, say hello to Larry. Thank you for being with us today, sir.
Thank you.
Take care. Kyle Kondik, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, when we come back, more of the show, but first stay tuned for your Newsmax Now update coming right at you.